Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boarding Pass, the podcast where we look at better, more effective communication strategies and skills between Westerners and foreign business partners and colleagues. And what we covered so far in these episodes are ways of introducing yourself, ways of making small talk, ways of extending a conversation or concluding a conversation so you can move on to the next order of business, and body language. And so what I wanted to do is just kind of do a little bit of a review or a little bit of an overview of the sort of the rules really of how to speak to someone who is a non-native English speaker. And by the way, none of what we're going to discuss in today's episode really applies to people, to listeners who are either near native fluent, very fluent, or very confident and comfortable in speaking English. You can disregard these do's and don'ts that we are going to go over. That being said, yes, this is the do's and don'ts episode. We're going to come up with some examples of the do's and don'ts, and kind of brainstorm together really the circumstances we might find ourselves in if we're failing at our communication, and ways to get out of those situations. And also being mindful of, think of all the times in which communication didn't go very effectively, and it should have been done better. So as you know, we are going to look at the do's, don'ts, and do's, the sort of happy sandwich of things that we need to remember and things we need to remember to avoid doing when we are speaking to our foreign customers and our peers. Discuss what are some of the obvious examples and pitfalls of the things that we do when we are speaking so that we are better understood. But again, this is the do's and don'ts episode. So start brainstorming while we're going through this podcast. Brainstorm what are some examples of times in which you personally saw at work a bad communication or a miscommunication, or a way in which you saw communication should have been better handled. Think about a manager or a boss that you had, or a company that you worked with that did not handle communication very effectively. Let's go over the do's. What are some of the common rules that we need to understand, right? Think about when you went to visit maybe your grandparents or a relative that you hadn't seen before or hadn't seen in a long time when you were growing up, or when you had guests come over to your house. You had to sort of establish the rules in your home, but you didn't give them very specific rules for everything involving your home. You had to settle on a few basic rules, and then you had to explain them very simply and very directly. And be mindful that if they didn't follow the rules exactly to the letter, you accommodated them a little bit and you compromised. And so that's what we're going to go over. So what are some of the things that you should do? Keep your distance. Okay? And that comes back to what we talked about earlier about body language and gestures. We're going to touch on that a little bit again, but really it's the keeping space between you and the listener. And it is a very American tendency to want to close the distance with the listener if you feel they're struggling, or to lean into the listener as you're trying to explain something to them to make sure they are understood. It's also a very American thing to do, to show someone something or show someone how to do something by involving yourself and them in the process. Avoid doing that. There is a way to show someone how to do something without crowding their space. Avoid this, right? So keep your distance. Body language and gestures. Smile. Keep yourself open and facing your listener. Make good eye contact, but don't be weird about it. Don't stare at them, okay? If you can sense that they're struggling or they're processing something or they are consistently asking for more explanation or they are not understanding a word or a phrase or something that you said. Meanwhile, my COVID hair is poking me in the eye. Yeah. Okay, that's very, very relevant, right? Don't let things like that distract you and bother you. Relax. Take a deep breath, slow down, calm down, and don't take things like that personally. That is a good transition to the don'ts rules, the things to avoid, a no-no. Let's brainstorm a few of these. Think about things that you know from your own experience, things that are not going to work if you do things this way. An example, I often see this, is shouting. Saying the same thing again louder does not help a person understand what you said. Their problem is not their listening. Their problem is a number of different things. They don't know a word or a phrase. They don't understand the question or the statement. It was maybe too fast. Maybe what they think they understood is incorrect, but they don't know that, and it's not fitting other things that you said. There's any number of things that are going to go on. Yelling at them the same thing again is not going to help them understand, okay? If a foreigner talks to you in their foreign language and you don't know that language, their shouting it in your face is not going to help you learn the words. Right? Don't shout. Touching. That's a cardinal HR rule. It's even more crucial you avoid doing this in a cross-cultural situation. It is a very commonplace Western thing to want to touch a person to express something or to explain something. Okay? It's also very typical to want to grab someone and take them to the thing to show them how to do it or how to use it. The rule I want to express here, and this is an iron rule I'm insisting you follow, don't touch them. Repeating the same thing, which it's a little different than repeating something and saying something another way. You are repeating an idea, and that's sometimes necessary. You have to repeat an idea. And actually, that might be something that you should practice. Do repeat some of the things you say, but just not in the same way. So saying a word they don't know twice is not going to help them understand the word. Yeah, right? Hey, have you ever used a confabulator? Hey, have you ever used a confabulator? Okay, first of all, I have no idea what a confabulator is. I just made it up. It's a nonsense word. It doesn't exist. But don't be going around insisting the other person will get it if you just say it 10 times fast. It's not going to work. So don't do that. What is going to work in this case is saying things a different way. Hey, do you know how to use a confabulator? Do you know that thing that does the thing? Do you know what I'm talking about? You do? Okay. Do you know how to use it? What's the first step? Okay, so you've come at a thing from different directions, and that's exactly what I'm asking you to do here. Speaker talk time. Some people have a very hard time with silence, And some people have a very hard time with saying something once, simply and directly. You want to try to use a kind of a textbook, not quite baby English, for a listener whose English is not very advanced or isn't up to a certain level where you can have complicated conversations, right? So it is a very natural tendency to want to make longer sentences and many sentences when a 5-word sentence will do, and you should. Keep to the short questions, keep to the short sentences, and be aware that in a 5-minute conversation, the two of you might exchange 5 sentences together, and that's okay. It comes back to what we said before. Relax, take a breath. So if this is the thing to avoid, the thing to do is monitor your speaker talk time, and that is just common sense. So let's go over some common sense things that we're going to do and my final thoughts on this matter. So, common sense do's. Like I said, accept silence. Why? Well, because when you're asking someone a question, the listener might understand your question, but they are having to do a lot more processing in their mind than you or I normally do because we're native speakers. They are trying to frame an answer, and sometimes they're trying to do it in a way they hope doesn't make them look silly. So they are rehearsing how to answer, and they might not be aware how long it's taking. Right? So a simple small talk question. How's the weather at your Tokyo office? So the listener is trying to process the question. How is the weather? Okay, they're asking about the weather, and there's an added tag here at my home office. Okay, well, they're trying to think of, okay, are they asking for the weather today, or are they asking how it was this week? You know, a lot of complicated things. So they're going to settle on an answer. Okay, it's been cloudy lately. All right, so they're rehearsing. Should I say it this way? Do I make a longer sentence? Do I make a shorter sentence? They're kind of getting all jumbled up, but they are not aware how long it's taking for them to do this. Meanwhile, you're sitting there waiting for a response. Accept the silence. Also, be aware in some Asian cultures, not answering a question is okay. In their home culture, it is not rude or inappropriate to simply not answer a question. Where I'm from, if someone asks you a question and you don't answer, that's incredibly rude. And we even sometimes respond, hey, buddy, don't be rude. I'm asking you a question. But in countries like Korea and Japan, asking a question and someone dead silence, refusing to answer the question is not uncommon, and don't take it personally. And that's a key point I want to make here through all of this episode. Don't take any of this personally. You're in a business environment, and just accept the silences as they come, which comes to my next point, which is comprehension check. Do a little check. Make sure that they understand a word. Make sure they understand a phrase. Make sure that they understood an idiom. You might have used an idiom and have not been aware of it, but if you are an experienced business traveler or you have experience interacting with foreign customers, you kind of have a radar already. I'm trusting that you do. That you use a phrase and you back up a little bit and you go, that kind of was a phrase. Do they know that phrase? Ask them. Hey, did you understand what I said? Did you understand what I said when I said blah, blah, blah? And if they don't, hey, use it as a teaching moment. Teach them what it means. And that comes to my next point, which is don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to correct them if they make a mistake. Interrupt them. So when I was growing up, I was taught it's really bad to interrupt a conversation. Okay? But actually, as your communication coach, I'm going to tell you right now, it's okay for you to do that. Don't worry about that. Go ahead and interrupt, but be polite about it. Say, excuse me, I need to interrupt you for a moment. But did you say something? Right. Which comes to my next point, which is be a little more polite than usual. Don't be formal and don't use formal phrases. Use common everyday. Which comes to my next point, which is, as always, asking things. Ask questions. Don't be shy. When you are making a statement, don't be afraid to follow up with questions. If you are not sure someone is understanding what you said, don't be afraid to ask them if they did. So don't be shy about those things. Don't be shy about asking questions. And don't be afraid to answer questions too. So think of all of the common foibles and mix-ups and miscommunications that happened on TV shows like Friends, right? Think about how many crime dramas would be really, really short if there was better communication. And also think of all of the political gaffes that have happened in history and how much better they would have gone if our politicians and our leaders were better at speaking more effectively. If they simply followed our do's, don'ts, and do's, maybe they wouldn't be in the situations that they found themselves in. And I hope that you don't get into trouble either by following those steps. If you have any questions, if you have any comments, if you have any more do's, any more don'ts you'd like me to share on this podcast, at me on Twitter at JachiE, and leave comments on the various social medias that you find me. On YouTube, there are several links available. If you're seeing this on Twitch, there are several links available there too. So thank you very much. And this has been another episode of Boarding Pass, and I am Jack. Good night.